Hey friends, it's Maria here at the Preparedness Corner. Hope you are having a wonderful day. Today we are going to be talking about the 3-day or 72-hour kit supply list. This is meant for times of emergency, say it's a hurricane or an earthquake or a flood or even a pandemic where you are needing to be able to get out quick or stay in place quickly. This kit will be your go-to for that period of time. We're going to be talking about food, power, water, and other supplies that you will need, documentation, shelter, etc. So let's just dive right in. How to use the supply list. This spreadsheet here is going to be locked when you first see it. However, we want this to be dynamic, something useful for you. So be sure to go to File, go down to Make a Copy, and it will allow for these cells to be unlocked so you can make changes. I recommend only changing the cells that are in yellow. The green cells do have formulas in them, and if you erase any of these numbers and formulas, it'll be a little more challenging to use the sheet. So I recommend not touching anything in the green and just changing the things in the yellow. You can dynamic to number of family members, say change it to one family member there, and all of a sudden it changes the numbers for one person, and you can go up and down. Number of days, I have it set at 3 because this is a 3-day, 72-hour kit supply list. However, if you'd like to increase or decrease the number of days, it will adjust accordingly as well. I do recommend, however, not using this supply list for anything over a week. This is meant for short-term, and more long-term supply lists will be a bit different than this. So this is good for up to less than a week. So you want to also mark your calendars. As you get going on this, mark your calendars for 6 months from the time that you actually put your kit together so that you can go back and refresh the food, water, medication, anything else that's in there that may be perishable. Make sure your documents are up to date, batteries are charged, etc. And also, as we go through the supply list, keep in mind to try to find things that can help keep the bags light and not bulky. Space is going to be your number one challenge, and it can be your number one friend at the same time. So try to keep things small and compact as much as possible. All right, let's dive right into the items. Let's first talk about food and water. Now, as we go through, I'm not going to go through item by item. I'm sure that you can read through and make adjustments towards your diet, but I do want to point out a few high-level pieces to this. This is a 3-day supply. We're talking about one person right now. So these are quantities for about one person for 3 days with no refrigeration or cooking available to you. So you'll want to find some high-calorie food items. So protein bars. They have these really great type of MRE bars that you can get. Canned proteins, canned meats, dried fruit, dried trail mixes are fantastic. You also want to have some quick energy like a candy or gum, especially if you need to get that blood sugar up. When you are in an emergency situation with children particularly, the candy does make a big difference. Giving them a lollipop really does lift the spirits. So make sure you have those little pieces in there as well. Some of the biggest questions I get in regards to food and water is particularly with water. Water is a heavy thing to move around. You can just grab a case of that water from Costco to know how heavy water can be. And with the recommendation of having a gallon of water per person per day, that means a heck of a lot of water for a family to have in their supply. And if this is a 72-hour kit that needs to be portable, that's not necessarily realistic. So let's talk about water for a second and what my recommendation here is. My recommendation is to try to have 1 gallon of water per person for the entire 72-hour kit, and supplementing it with a water filtration bottle or a straw. There are water filtration bottles like Catadine, and then there are also ones called Life Straw. There are some water filtration recommendations here on this link. You can check them out. But that will allow for you to be able to get water from even some compromised sources and be able to filter them into clean drinking water and not have to lug around lots of bottles of water. I learned about this from a friend of mine who is in the military, and that's what they do to keep their supplies light and yet be able to still have the supplies they need for water and for life-saving utilities. Also, if you are going to be doing water filtration, or if you need to have a larger container for it, I would recommend having some water for purification tablets just in case on hand. Right. Let's go down now to clothing. Clothing. This section here is not dynamic on people, by the way. I just want to make that note here because I chose not to put it dynamic because you need really 2 shirts, for example, per person. And if I were to make it dynamic per family, you'd end up with a lot more than 2 shirts here. So I thought it would be easier to view this way, but just note this is not dynamic per person. Just keep in mind that when you're putting this together. But let's talk about the long sleeve shirts for a second. Say you live in a place like Phoenix, Arizona, where it is hot, hot, hot in the summer times, and having a long sleeve shirt would be horrible because you could overheat. My recommendation still stays the same, to keep a long sleeve shirt in your kit, because in case of winter or summer, you can adjust the sleeve length. If it's hot outside, you can cut off those sleeves. If it's cold outside, you can leave those sleeves long. And it's a lot easier to keep them long than it is to have a short sleeve shirt and try to make yourself warm without it. You'll also notice that for pants as well. I also recommend having a pair of snow gloves even if you do not live in a place of snow. Now, why do I say that? Well, I say that for a couple of reasons. Because if you are stuck in an outdoor situation where you are having to, well, sleep outdoors, it's nice to keep your hands warm. That's one thing. But more important than that is that these snow gloves also can double as a protection for you. Say you have to go out and pull some branches off a tree and they're really pokey, or you need to move some barbed wire for whatever reason. Snow gloves are beneficial for that. I know that what I'm talking about with bending trees and having barbed wire sounds a bit extreme, but you know what? We never know what kind of situations we can be in for the 72 hours after some type of emergency. So it's best to be prepared and to be over-prepared than under-prepared in any situation like this. Let's now talk about shelter and bedding. Shelters and beddings can be shared amongst several people. So you'll see that you'll see quantities here. You can share up to 2 people. The tarp can be shared up to 6 people depending on size. Also, the tents can be shared for family members depending on the size. So you can keep that in mind. Another optional piece that you may want to have with you is a sleeping bag. Sleeping bags, though, are bulky. So if you have your 72-hour kit on a shelf in the garage and you happen to have some extra shelf space next to it and it's not too cumbersome, put a sleeping bag there. That would be a good thing to have if you have the space. Emergency heating blankets are fantastic. These are a foil type of material that traps in and reflects the body heat back to you. They are very lightweight, and I highly recommend having these emergency heat blankets as part of your shelter and bedding. Now scroll down to fuel and light. Battery lighting like flashlights, lamps, headlamps are really great. Headlamps specifically are fantastic to have in your 72-hour kit because for a couple of reasons. Number one, you don't have to have your hands cumbered by them. And if you have children, that's key to be able to have your arms available to be able to help them. Also, if you have children, having little child-sized headlamps is great because not always do they like to keep the flashlight still, and sometimes they get heavy for them. If you just strap it onto their head like a headband, it's great. Also, headlamps are great because they're so lightweight. They're just little teeny tiny lights that make a big spread. Very, very useful. Also, with battery lighting, you can get solar-powered battery ones you can crank them, so you don't necessarily need all these extra batteries here. But if you do battery powered lights, make sure, of course, you do have extra batteries and you change those out frequently. There are some other things on here you can take a look at. Optional stove in a can. This is one of my little favorite tools here. It's kind of like a sterno type of can. You could light it and it can heat up things if you wanted to warm food. Also can provide heat on cold nights as well. Next section I'll point out, just take out a few highlights here, is in equipment. If you have canned goods, make sure you have a can opener. Definitely important. Having an old school radio, they're a little bit harder to find these days, but having an old school radio that you can tune into FM and AM is very important. If you have a ham radio, that would be even better. Those are great to have sometimes if you need to be able to tune into communications. Pocket knives, of course, are fantastic. Dust masks, N95 are better if there is any type of airborne illness going around. Also, some zip ties and bungee cords. If you're needing to make shelter, these will be very important to be able to help attach the shelter. And let's talk about real quick down here, paper plates and cups, forks, spoons, etc. Now, I understand wanting to be environmentally friendly. However, having disposable paper plates and cups, forks, spoons, etc. help keep things light and can be multi-purposed in different states of emergency. So I recommend keeping these as disposable items. Let's go down to personal supplies and medication. Having your toiletries and having at least a basic set of toiletries is important. Going into the store and finding the travel-sized toiletries are great. They're lightweight and they can store for a good amount of time. I would recommend putting them into Ziploc bags, especially like the toothpaste and if you have any type of shampoo or liquid soap. Put those in plastic bags so that they don't accidentally leak over the other supplies and ruin things. Toilet paper. Make sure you have toilet paper. You can actually remove the center of the tube and flatten it and put it into a Ziploc bag to help keep it dry. So, little tip to make the toilet paper less bulky. Make sure you also have your medicines. Have medicines for yourself, medicines for your children. And if you have any prescription medications, say that you or a family member has diabetes, make sure you have your diabetes medication or your heart medication or whatever it is that you need to have on a daily basis. Make sure you have at least a 3-day supply put into there and mark your calendar to rotate those medications when they expires. So if your expiration date on it is in December, make sure you set your alarm on your phone or your calendar alert to November to switch it out so that you have a little bit of time to be able to use that medication before it expires, and you can refill that space with medication that has a little bit longer lifespan. First aid kit and having other medicines is important, and one of my favorite things to have in my first aid kit are essential oils. They are incredibly powerful. I am a big believer in them. I use them all the time in my family because they're so effective. Lavender is great with burns. Say a child gets a burn from touching a hot fire, put the little bit of lavender oil on it, and it's amazing how it takes out the burn and takes out the heat rather from the burn very quickly. The helichrysum is I would say right there with lavender is my favorite. Actually, it might even go into number one favorite because helichrysum is a coagulant. Just the other day, my baby got his finger smashed in the door and it started to swell up. You could see that it was the huge blood blister was about to be forming in his poor little finger. And when I grabbed my helichrysum, touched it onto his little growing blood blister, and it stopped the growth and helped him heal very quickly. I've seen it also work on other cuts of open wounds on my other children, like who they bump their head or whatnot, and it makes a big difference. So having that in your emergency kit, at least for me, is an essential piece. On Guard blend is also a great essential oil to have because it is antiviral, antibacterial. Breathe is great for helping promote respiratory openness. I have a son who is slightly asthmatic, And whenever he has challenge breathing, I often will put a drop or two of Breathe in my hands and cup it over his mouth, kind of as a breathing mask of sorts. And as he breathes in and out, helps open up his lungs. That's been my experience with it. I'm not a doctor, and I am just a mother who uses these things and has found real results, is what I'm just trying to say. Also, baby supplies. This is actually dynamic for number of babies. This is not tied to number of family members. This is specifically for babies. So say you have 4 babies, you need a lot more diapers. But if you only have 1, this is the number of supplies we'd recommend. These are disposable diaper numbers in here, but if you have cloth diapers are great. I don't know if exactly for 72-hour kit you'd want to be, cleaning out diapers for, the cloth diapers. I know personally I'd rather dispose of them, especially in an emergency situation, but for more of a long-term supply, cloth diapers are preferred in that way for longer term supplies. Make sure you have your formula. Even if you breastfeed your baby, it is important to have formula on hand and available if there's an instance where you are not available or you are incapacitated and somebody else needs to take care of your baby. Please, please, please have the formula on hand, have the bottles there, and the ability for somebody to be able to care for your baby in case of an emergency. I also recommend having an infant carrier of some sort, a baby Bjorn or a Solly Wrap or Ergo, to be able to carry your child on your person without arms, without hands, really. I have a baby Bjorn for my 1-year-old, and then I have an Ergo carrier for my 4-year-old because she's light enough to fit into it. So if for some reason I need to carry them for a long distance, it's easy. Or if they can't walk for a long distance and I need to carry them, I can do that, or to keep them closer and safe. Let's go down to documents and money. Having copies of your important documents is really key, particularly in the case of a flood or a fire. I like to have photocopies of these documents in my 72-hour kit. In the case that I am not able to grab my documents from my home safe, before I have to leave in an emergency. So ideally, I would grab them from the home safe and take them with me. But in case I can't, at least they're in my 72-hour kit, or copies of them are there, so that I have the numbers and can make any needed phone calls to, whether it be to put credit cards on pause or to contact insurance companies, etc. And then there's a list of miscellaneous supplies here. Having good sturdy bags that are easy to carry are great. I also like to have a big plastic tub to organize and protect supplies. Paper towels, duct tape, garbage bags, these are all important pieces to have. Make sure you also have some cash on hand, quarters. Say you need to access a phone, a payphone. Yes, there are still payphones out there. And say the cell towers are down, having quarters is really important for that. Sharpie markers, also having toilet waste bags because people will need to use the restroom. Make sure you have those on hand. Also, you must not forget your fur babies. Don't forget your pet family members, and pack according to their needs as well. Make sure you have enough food for them. I believe that dogs on average eat about 2 cups of food a day for an average sized dog. Your dog may eat more, your dog may eat less, or if you have a cat or a gerbil or a bird that you need to take with you, make sure that you have that pet food on hand. You will find throughout this document there are some links for recommendations, like the essential oil recommendation, first aid kits, and likely this sheet will, when you see it, will have more links in here. Feel free to click on those. It will take you to a product recommendation sheet where you can go directly and buy it online at your convenience if you would like to access any of my favorite items. I hope you have an enjoyable time putting together your supply kit list. I know that as you put it together, it's going to bring you peace of mind. Having your 72-hour kit And just even knowing that you can survive for 3 days and your family will be all right for 3 days provides so much peace of mind. And I highly recommend getting this together soon. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm on Instagram at Preparedness Corner, as well as on Facebook. You can find our group Preparedness Corner. Join us. And if you have any ideas for other community members, please jump in and join the conversation. We are all about preparing and getting ourselves ready together for any emergency that may face us. I hope you have a great day.